Science, that was a really cool experience to write that chapter. I actually worked with somebody, Dr. Sanook Lee, who's a neuronal cell biologist, formerly at UCSF, and now working with another organization I name in the book. But I worked with her because I'm not a scientist, and that was something that I purposely, when I wrote this, wanted to invite people like you into the conversation in a different way. So I included science. There's a chapter in here that integrates psychotherapy and the assessment component. And I think for me, the science chapter, it's a big one. It's very informative. She was so good in working with me on like honing it down, because I literally, Rob, I would interview her for hours. Then I would transcribe. I wouldn't have my transcriptionist transcribe. I would do it so that I could really digest what she was saying. And like I remember you and I were in communication when I was writing this, and I would be like, my brain is done. Like, it's cooked, because I don't think that way. So it definitely stretched my brain capacity. The thing that I think stood out for me the most in the science component is this thing about mirror neurons and what's actually happening. So if you and I have a really good dynamic, like the minute you and I meet, we decide within a tenth of a second, like him, trust him, don't like him, don't trust him. It's like a tenth of a second. It happens really, really quick. That's just our subconscious and our mirror neurons at play. And the bottom line of it is basically, if you're coming from a place of congruence and you're in alignment, you're confident, you're being honest, you're solid in yourself, and you come to me, my mirror neurons pick up on that, and they're going to reflect that back. But if you're coming to me and you're actually in a place of incongruence, or there's the lack of integrity, or there's something going, or you're judging me or whatever, my mirror neurons pick up on that, they're going to reflect that back. And so that was one piece. The other piece was this idea of choice points, and how at every moment I can choose how to rewire my brain. So I can choose to go negative and complain, or I can choose to go, oh, wow, I have a complaint. Okay, what's the request? And every time I shift my way of thinking and I choose the more, let's just say, the higher vibration path, my brain learns to do that, and I build more neural pathways, to actually make that happen, and I basically rewire it. It's called neuroplasticity. So everything is changeable. So like you look at, and I've seen this in my work with people, it's like you look at somebody who's actually pretty negative all the time, and they start to just practice a couple things, So it's like as simple as, okay, don't complain for 1 week. Every time you want to complain, even to yourself, you catch that contraction, and then you go, all right, what is the request I'd like instead? What is it I'd like instead? And the more you do that, the more you just start to see the requests. Mm-hmm. And so just doing that, then you start to see a shift. People feel better. They start to rewire their brain in the way they see things, and then that becomes more of a habit. Mm-hmm. There's a ton in that chapter. I think the last thing I would say about it is that, so I've always taught this work. I've been building out this work like almost kind of my whole life, I think, but really focusing on it since 2009-ish. And everything that I've shared in the IEP work, intuitively, I've always known it worked. It's always worked for me. These tools work for me. I've watched it work for people. But what I found was really interesting was that when I worked with Dr. Lee, we literally went through every single thing, the reboot, the bubble, lowest vibration in the room, George, Mary, like all these different things we went through. And every single thing in the IEP work, there is a physiological thing that's happening. Like even down to meditation and self-care and what's happening with our brains, or, when we're doing too much TV, or we drink alcohol or whatever, we're toxifying our neural pathways, mm-hmm. So it was just, I'm super glad I brought that chapter into it.